Okay. So good morning. This is Lakeisha Kirkendall with Desirable Property Management. And today we are going to talk about the topic of renters insurance and homeowners insurance. I think this is a really great conversation we're going to have. The gentleman that you're going to hear from, he's amazing when it comes to explaining things. He's a professional who has been in this business for a very long time, and he actually does a lot of my personal and business coverages. The reason that I've stuck with him for as long is there's no situation that I come to him with that he doesn't break it down clearly so I can understand. And I think that's important whenever you're doing business. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce Mr. Will Grayhart, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and where he works. And then we're going to jump right into some really important questions for you guys.
Hey, good morning. I really appreciate that introduction, Lakeisha. My name is Will Greatheart. My wife, Stephanie Greatheart, she's a new agent at our agency. We're located out of Newport News. We are, in fact, a independent brokerage, which basically means we partner with different carriers to offer everything from personal insurance, such as your home, auto, boat, and commercial business insurance. Um, and that's kind of like our level of expertise. And so, of course, if you ever need anything, reach out to Lakeisha or us directly, and we'll be more than happy to see what we can do for you.
Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So, are you excited about your new journey?
I am. I am.
Okay, great.
It's different, but I'm excited.
You have an amazing teacher, instructor, partner, so that's good. He'll get you right where you need to be. So, what we're going to talk about, I want to jump right into, we're going to talk about some renters insurance. So, as a property manager, I know when I get new clients, a lot of them ask me about that. They ask me, do I ask my tenant to get renters insurance? And I let them know I do not ask them to get that. That is a requirement in order to rent from me. And I also let them know about how I require to be listed as an additional interest to their policy. And do you want to shed a little light on what that is and why that's a good or a bad thing?
Absolutely. So I think renters insurance is something that is extremely important for both sides of the agreement. Both sides being the homeowner, also known as the landlord, and the renter, also known as the tenant. The reason that it is important for the tenant to have it is because if anything were to happen, any sort of act of God or other fault of human beings, it would be covered under the renter's insurance according to their liability limits. One of the key things that we spoke about early on was making sure that the property management company and or the owner of the property are listed as a interested party, because what we've seen over the years is a lot of tenants will start a policy to show proof that they do have insurance, and as soon as they get into place, within a week or so, that policy is canceled. Now, obviously, myself, just like any other agency, if that happens, we don't have any like bell to go off to remind or to inform that property manager or that homeowner that insurance has been covered. By listing yourself as a property manager or the responsible party as an interested party on that policy, what will happen is not only will the owner of the policy or the tenant be notified upon cancellation, but that interested party that's listed on the policy will also be sent a notification and then know that they have a person who is unprotected in their property. So it's definitely important for both parts.
Right. So what my office does is anytime we do get those letters from any insurance company, we immediately reach out to the tenant and we let them know they have X amount of days to provide us with proof. Or we as a company, we implement our own coverage on the property. We don't cover their personal items, but we do have an insurance that we would issue that covers the property itself. So individual landlords, that is something that you would have to have set in place. If they default on their insurance, what do you do next to keep your property covered? So that's another very important thing. Let's also talk about when you tell somebody to get insurance, renter's insurance. Well, how much? How much do they need? What's a good number? What's a bad number? How do you base that?
So that's a good question. Actually, that's an excellent question because I get that all the time when clients call and they'll say, "Well, what is the average?" And so the best way that I explain it to my clients is there is no such thing as an average coverage because insurance is a very personal thing and it is based off of the individual. The best analogy that I've been given to my clients over years is this. Imagine you are in a moving truck. It's moving day. You're getting ready to go from point A, which is your old place, to point B. You pack everything that you own in this moving truck. And if for some chance that this moving truck was to disappear, fall off a cliff, or into an accident, catch on fire, all of your personal belongings that you own, that you're moving from A to B, would be lost in that truck. When you called me to inform me of this loss, how much of a check would you need for me to write to make you whole again? And that is the amount that you should insure your personal property for when it comes to renters insurance. So, kind of just reiterating what I said, there is no average. There is no what do most people do because, everyone's home is different. And so you need to do what will cover you to the fullest.
Okay. What about when the tenants are calling to start policies? How long do they take to get them in effect?
So a renter's policy could be started within 30 minutes. Those policies are actually fairly simple. The biggest thing that we need to know is one, is there an interested party that needs to be named on the policy? We need to have their name, their address, and their phone number so that that notification that I mentioned earlier can, in fact, go out to them. The other big thing is how much of liability coverage does your property manager or landlord require for you to have? Now, the reason that that's important is because the renter's policy is made up of two parts. You have the general liability amount, which if something were to happen to the premises itself, that is what would cover that. So that is the landlord's protection. Then you have the personal property amount, which is the amount that covers that tenant's individual property that they own. And so those are key. So once we get those, the policy itself is pretty simple. You set it up the same day. Typically, it takes 20 minutes or less to set it up.
So landlords keep that in mind. If someone is trying to rent from you and they're telling you, they're waiting on their agent, it's been a couple of days, as we see here, does not take a couple of days for that policy. You may want to hold off on giving those keys to them until you have secured that insurance. And hopefully you will have our information here and you'll be able to forward them to Will, who could actually get that done the same day for you. We're going to jump over and talk to our landlords now. So we know that renters insurance is important. We know they need it. They have to have it. But what does our homeowners need?
So one of the biggest things that I stress to landlords, and I have just seen this over the years, landlords need to understand that if you purchase a property with an original intent of owner occupancy, and let's say after 12 months or after several years of ownership of the property, you change that occupancy. Well, the other entity that you have that agreement with, they need to be made aware of that. Your mortgage company, your lien holder. So if you're going to switch from owner occupancy, you need to let your mortgage company know that you now intend to rent out this property. And whatever capacity of rental you plan for that to be, that needs to be made clear in writing. It is a different type of insurance and it is a different type of coverage. And the biggest thing that I let my landlords know, one, landlord insurance is cheaper than homeowners insurance. So one, it's going to save you some money. Two, what you'll do is the biggest thing is you take yourself out of a situation where you may not be covered at all because of breach of contract. Because in the eyes of the mortgage company, well, we agreed on A, you've changed it to X, and we did not properly make sure that we can reestablish this agreement so we can be compensated appropriately for X agreement now. So that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing is you definitely need to contact your mortgage company. That needs to be the very first thing. Then you need to get in contact with your agent and switch that insurance over from homeowners insurance to landlord coverage.
Okay. And then so if a landlord is only renting this property out, let's just say for a year, now they're going to move back in it. Can they just simply call back and switch it again?
They would just call back and switch that insurance back to homeowners insurance. And the reason for that is because homeowner insurance it gives a much higher level of protection than what would be offered to you as a person renting out your property as a landlord. And so those differences, one, you don't need, which is the reason why typically landlord insurance is a lot cheaper, because to be honest, it's just less coverage. What it does is it covers the dwelling, and it will cover your personal property, which is very, very minimal. The average homeowner's policy on a $300,000 policy, they have about $150,000 to $180,000. Just depends on how that policy is structured in personal property. Well, as a landlord, you don't need $150,000 in personal property. Typically, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 will be suffice, which will be the result of that drastic decrease in annual premium.
Okay, great. So with we're going to jump back again to our renters. I just know from the property management side, some things that I guess people sometimes wonder, well, what exactly would you use that renter's policy for? So I know of one time where we had in one of our rentals a kitchen fire. And it was cooking, and not sure what she was cooking, but flames went up and destroyed the kitchen cabinets, things such as that. And that was an instance where we went to the tenants policy, the tenants renters insurance. Share maybe some other examples on how that would come into play where you would use that policy.
So I'm gonna try not to age us too much, Lakeisha, but several years ago, I think maybe less than 10 or maybe about 10 years ago, I don't know, you held a conference for property managers. I believe it was in the city of Newport News or maybe the city of Hampton, and I was a guest speaker. And one of the things that was a misconception amongst professionals was that we should stick with the standard of 100,000 for liability protection. You remember that?
I did. It was NARCM Property Management Group.
That is correct. And one of the big things that I explained to your audience that day was that, again, there is no standard number. And I know for a very long time, $100,000 was used. But what you have to understand is that number that you force your tenant to get in liability coverage, it matters in the instance of a fire. So let's just say, it's a regular, Tuesday evening, and your tenant is cooking at home, cooking for their family, and something catches on fire. One thing leads to another. The house burns up. So that tenant has typically $20,000 in personal property coverage. That $20,000 is exclusively for the personal property owned by your tenant. Well, where would that $250,000, $300,000, $500,000 comes from? That comes from the other part of the policy that I mentioned earlier, which is the liability limits. That is the 100,000. So let's say if your property is valued, well, not valued because it's not the way it works. So let's say your property has a estimated reconstruction cost of $275,000. Mm-hmm. And if you only require for your tenant to have a $100,000 liability limits, that is all you will receive in the case of that peril or that hazard. That house catches on fire, you're going to receive $100,000, which will give you a shortfall of $175,000. Where's that money coming from? Well, if your tenant doesn't have it, then it's going to come from your retirement, your savings, or any other resources that you have available to you.
Okay. So the value of the property itself, as we all have different home values, and as a property management company, you deal with different ones. So that's an important factor is, if you have maybe a 2-bedroom condo versus a 4-bedroom house, your value is going to be different. So should you keep that in mind for the policy amount? Is that correct?
So I just want to definitely specify, it's not the value. The reason that it is not the value is very simple. The value of a property, whether that be the condo or home, it includes the land. What we are talking about in insurance, because the insurance portion never covers land, it is only talking about reconstruction costs for that property. And so typically reconstruction software is something that you're typically going to get from a person in the insurance business. That's, I mean, unless maybe they have something on Google that you can kind of Google, which I'm sure you can, but that number is something that's going to come from your broker, or your agent. They're going to be able the ones, because that's standard practice for us to be able to find out what the approximate replacement cost or rebuild cost would be for your individual home. That is the number that you need to make sure you have above and beyond in your tenant's liability. So if your reconstruction cost comes back at $275,000 and your tenant only has $100,000, that's not enough. You need to immediately bump them up to $300,000, which is the next level. And then if it exceeds $300,000, the next level after that will be $500,000.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great information. One last question. Let's talk about renters insurance and pets. Give me some education on how that comes into effect. Someone has renters insurance, but they have a pet that's, maybe soiled the floors, carpet. What happens? How is that protected? Is that protected?
So one of the big things that carriers really worry about when it comes to pets is not so much damage done, because typically that damage done to the property is going to come out of the tenant security deposit. There's no real specific place in that policy that's going to cover that, because the carpet or walls is not covered under a renter's policy. That is what will be covered under the landlord policy, but that's a different conversation. I don't want to steer too far, because if we have something like a $500 cost and damage to the carpet from pet stains, and our deductible is $1,000, it wouldn't make sense to file that claim. It would rather make more sense to just pull that money from the security deposit of the tenant. But going back to that question about pets, the biggest thing with carriers and acceptance of your tenants is the breed of your pet, because a lot of different breeds, which if you thinking of it and you think it's probably one that's going to be banned, they probably are. A lot of your breeds that have known bite histories or have temperamental histories, those breeds will be banned from carriers. They will not cover your tenant. And so that is something, again, as a landlord, you need to be on the lookout for. If you know for a fact that you do allow pets, if you know that you allow all breeds of pets, you need to make sure that that policy that your new tenant brings you, that they have disclosed to their new or potential insurance company that they have that breed of pet that they actually own. Because if a bite was to occur and it was not disclosed, you nor that tenant are going to be covered.
Wow. That's some real powerful information. So I know we can, I always have questions. I have questions for days, and that's why you're one of my favorites, because you answer all of them all the time for me. But for our listeners, I'm not going to hold them, but I just wanted them to get a little bit of the insight that I actually have the privilege of jumping on the phone with you, asking these questions when I'm thinking about getting a new policy, when I'm thinking about a situation. You break it down, the pros, the cons, and obviously helping me to make an educated decision. So I wanted my viewers and my listeners and my potential owners and potential tenants to actually get that same information. I just think that, once you're in a better position to make an educated move moving forward. And I think that that's important. And I'm sure my owners are going to also appreciate this updated information. Just sometimes you actually forget, you were so busy with moving out, you forgot to call and switch the policy. Okay, this is going to be a nice refresher and reminder for them. So that's a great thing.
Absolutely.
I want you to let them know how they can contact you and Stephanie. So if they do have questions, you have an email address, you have a work number we can share with them.
Absolutely. So the office to our number, the general number is going to be 757-301-1954. And you can email me at wgreat@Greatheart Financial, or my wife, Stephanie, at Stephanie at greatheartfinancial.com. And you can also reach us online at our website at greatheartfinancialservices.com.
Perfect. Well, again, Stephanie and Will, I thank you so much for your time today. And we're going to definitely do it again. We may pick one topic and just get more in detail for that one. maybe next time we're going to talk to our investors. You know, Lakeisha Kirkendall does it all, so I always have my investors wanting to come get started. And maybe you can help them. What's the right way to protect yourself when we're getting started with these investment deals? So I definitely look forward to talking to you guys again.
Thank you, Lakeisha.
Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
much.